For more than 25 years now, ICIC has worked with and celebrated high-growth small businesses in under-resourced communities. These companies are the economic catalyst for their entire neighborhoods and their entire communities. Remarkably important to addressing some of the important challenges we're facing in these communities today. ICIC's work now continues with even greater vigor to support these extraordinary entrepreneurs who are at the forefront of the movement for racial justice and economic justice. ICIC's role and the dedication to these topics began a long time ago and has been baked into our mission at ICIC since our founding 25 years ago in the wake of the beating of Rodney King by police in Los Angeles and the uprising that followed. This was a time that I think many of you probably remember, although it's been years. At the time of the LA riots, one of my students at Harvard Business School, Willie Woods, actually came to me and suggested and asked me to think about applying my work on economic development, on building companies in communities to this issue of economic injustice and areas like LA at the time. I had applied this thinking to many countries, to many states, to many other communities, but would never really applied it to these economically underserved communities. And it proved to be a very helpful and powerful way of thinking, which has led us to where we are today. Recalling these events reminds me of the challenges we've faced for a long, long time given the entrenched history in the United States in this area. This work on companies in economically distressed areas has been our focus for 25 years, not because the solutions are easy, but because the implications for our society are so profound. If we can't address and build business activity in these communities that create jobs, that create opportunities for citizens, no other way that we can approach this question is going to really bear fruit. Now, when we confronted this challenge about 25 years ago, there really were no strategies. There really was no approach. It was just happening, and it was just, we were stuck with a lot of communities and a lot of individuals without good jobs, without good opportunities, and without any business base to speak about. There was a lot of anger, and some of us at ICIC, some of the early founders, including Willie Woods and Whitney Tilson, who was another one of my students at Harvard Business School at the same time, who joined up and worked with me full-time for several years on this. We were looking for a path forward. We were looking for a way to do something, not just be upset, not just be unhappy, but find a better path forward. I recall speaking at the time to the Secretary of Treasury during that period, who I actually happen to know quite well. And I recall him telling me, as I was describing what ICIC was thinking about, that this wasn't going to work. He said, we have to fix all the public schools first before we're going to build businesses in economically underserved areas in America. And although I certainly agree that fixing all our public schools is critically important and will have a huge impact on these communities by equipping the young people with better training and better opportunity, what do we do in the meantime? We still haven't fixed all the public schools in inner city areas. So what should we do? This was the challenge facing ICIC at the very beginning. Our core group of people at ICIC observed this heavy concentration of poverty in these core areas of major cities, and we felt the need to take a deep dive and really look at these communities and try to understand their economies and formulate a strategy that would directly and more over time really address this problem. This really started to really rethink how we looked at these kind of communities. Historically, we'd seen these communities as a social problem, manifesting social dysfunction, social inequities. But we believe very strongly that this was also, at the core, really a business issue. because what we had to do was really build business opportunities in these areas if we were going to really create any change. Healthy businesses that were minority owned by members of the community, if we could establish those, this is the way we could bring jobs. This is the way we could bring good wages to these communities. This is the way we could generate capital that could be invested to improve the circumstances of these communities. And the resulting economic growth would start to move us in the right direction. That was the ICIC's quite controversial strategy at the time. Let me spend a few minutes telling you how we've approached this over the years and what we've accomplished since this ICIC strategy was really put in place. Now, in order to ultimately implement this idea, we came to recognize that we had to look at inner cities. If we're going to build businesses, we're going to have to look at them not just as a disadvantaged location. We were going to have to find what advantages, what foundations they could build upon in order to build businesses. And this, of course, seemed like it was impossible. How could we have businesses in these areas? I talked to many CEOs of major companies during this period about what we were doing, and they would tell me over and over again, well, you know, why would you try to build businesses in these communities? There are no businesses in these communities. But what we discovered as we did our research was that there already were a fair number of businesses that really amazing entrepreneurs had founded, that had somehow got to be viable. And they were doing just what we thought they were doing. They were disproportionately hiring local residents to work for them, rather than the typical company coming into such an area. It's going to look outside of the area for their employees because they have no awareness, they have no understanding of the circumstances. What we learned in our research was that these distressed communities actually have a large pool of available workers. They just were underemployed. A lot of people in inner cities in America don't have a job, but many do. And the focus of this work at ICIC was to really create the opportunity to find those people that were equipped to work and start with them and build a foundation on top of that. We also documented with our research that these communities had typically a very underserved local market for goods and services. A classic example was food. Inner city areas, if you go back to those days, had no supermarkets. If residents of these communities wanted to get decent quality good food at reasonable prices, they'd have to get on the bus and go miles and miles to totally new neighborhoods to find some place to get food. And this was one of many areas where if we could establish some businesses in these areas, they would have a very large local market that they could draw on. And this proved to be true over and over again as we have gone through this journey over these many years. Meeting the unmet demand proved to be a real edge for companies that were based in these economically distressed areas. It seems inconsistent, but it actually is quite consistent with the reality that the citizens of these communities actually faced. Also, these communities are typically very close to the core, to the downtown in cities across the country. So even if they can go beyond just serving their local needs, they can provide products and services to the many companies that are located fairly nearby, right in the downtown core. A great example is a place like Newark, where the port of Newark, a gigantic port with tens of thousands of employees, was very near the inner city of Newark, and yet nobody kind of understood the potential that this created for really building up the nearby areas of the city with real business opportunity. So it was this process that took place over long periods of time, facing a fairly continuous skepticism that ultimately has led to quite a transformation of what inner city economies look like. There are hundreds and thousands of companies. They employ thousands and thousands of people at good wages, and have created an opportunity for these communities finally to start to get momentum and finally start to pull themselves out of this disadvantaged status that they've been in for so long. If we can keep doing this, sooner or later, we are going to solve this problem. But it was a long, hard battle, and as the recent situation in America has shown, it hasn't solved it yet. There's still much more to be done. We found that in order to build these companies, we just couldn't hope that some entrepreneurs showed up. We had to actually take a more aggressive stance. And so ICIC's approach over the years has involved a number of critical programs that I think many of you are familiar with. One was what we call inter-city capital connections. We understood that entrepreneurs that are in these areas need capital, and there's nobody providing capital to those kind of companies. So ICIC created a program to really equip and train inner-city entrepreneurs in how to raise money and bridge and broker them with financial providers who could see this opportunity. And that's taken place over the last multiple years. And billions of dollars now have been raised by inner-city companies using this program. We also established a very strong partnership with Goldman Sachs and encouraged them and worked with them to create what they call the 10,000 Small Businesses Program. Goldman agreed with us that we have to build business in these communities if these communities are going to be real communities that thrive and have a future. And they created a comprehensive program of providing training and education and mentoring to these entrepreneurs building these businesses. And some multiple years later, a remarkable amount of progress had been made. Goldman Sachs has now put just about 10,000 companies through this process. These companies have grown disproportionately faster relative to their peers. They have been able to get access to capital partly through the connection with Goldman and through Goldman's own programs. And the net result has been a lot of job creation and a lot of opportunity for residents of those communities. The final aspect of the strategy here for revitalizing these communities and building businesses is to see not just the community itself, but to see the ways in which there could be partnerships with local governments, with development agencies, and with what we call anchor institutions. In many inner city areas, let's say Cleveland, for example, in the Cleveland inner city, you have the Cleveland Clinic. It's one of the leading hospitals in the world, major employer, a very growing, prosperous operation. But they started to realize that they were really in a neighborhood that there was a lot of incentive for them to make that neighborhood better, to make it more prosperous, to make it be a place that's perceived as safer, a place that is perceived as a place where people would want to work. And that's what Cleveland Clinic has done in Cleveland. As an anchor institution, they're tied to that location. It's their job to make that location better. And to do that, they've got to participate in creating these business opportunities as well. And of course, they buy a lot of goods and services. They build a lot of real estate. They provide a lot of training. They hire people. So the Cleveland Clinic, the anchors, have an opportunity to be a catalyst for, again, building up these neighborhoods. And so they did. And there are many other examples like that in other parts of America, and this whole anchor strategy model has been applied in cities across the country. It's been a journey, but it's a journey that's moving very rapidly, where we've made a lot of progress. We've also used the progress we've made to try to influence a much broader audience through doing systematic research on what was happening, on how the companies are proceeding, on their success, on how important they are to build assets and improve the environment in distressed neighborhoods. And we've been also mounting other programs to go beyond just the direct support of capital raising and training and education, to really connect these communities and their business bases with their whole surrounding regions. We have, and we hold inner city economic summits across the country. We have over the years, where we're training local government leaders about this model, about how this approach might work. And we've collected a lot of data We call it the state of inner cities, where we track how many companies, how they're growing, how the jobs look, how the incomes look, and we're able to show this opportunity and talk to local governments and other leaders. So I think if you tie all this together and think about what we were trying to do and the motivation behind this over the last 25 years, here's the conclusion. If we want to serve our distressed and under-resourced communities, if we want to solve the problem of concentrated poverty among minority populations, if we want to deal with racism, we can't just look at it as a social justice issue. Yes, it is a social justice issue. It is a fairness issue, but it's also a business issue. And if we can engage the power of business and also the support of companies in building these kind of opportunities that I've been talking about, we have an opportunity in America to make America great for everybody using our business skills and entrepreneurships, not just the kind of traditional beneficiaries of that. So I want to tell all of you at this conference how proud I am, and all of us at ICIC are, of the work that you have done in this area, that you are trying to do to make this goal a reality. If we want to deal with these fundamental core problems that have been brought up to the surface recently in this country, we're going to have to take a business approach, not just a social approach or a charitable approach, because it's the business approach that's going to give us growth and sustainability and the opportunity for this to keep building on itself as we've allowed that to do over some period of time. So I hope all of you, as you hear this story, will take a fresh look at these issues of racial justice and equity that have gained such great awareness lately, and tap into what we've learned about what to do about this. We're not helpless. This is not beyond us. And all of you in the business community, you can be a player in solving this problem. And there's no more important problem that we need to solve in America. So again, thank you for all of your support, and thank you for your willingness to step into this issue and be part of the next chapter of really eradicating these inequities and this injustice in America. Thank you.